Today I want to discuss a very controversial topic, a very new topic, a war of United States and Israel with Iran and with with Persia, with Iran, and this war is probably, I think it will take several weeks, and why this war even broke out. So. And what is my stance about it generally? So we see that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, is a very far right president. I am rather left wing person, so I don't like him personally, and I don't like his politics, but he's probably the most far right president of contemporary United States politics and our times. And he behaves in a very aggressive and sometimes even irrational way. We saw this in, for example, capturing the president of the independent state Venezuela, even though Maduro is accused of having connections with the cartels and doing things against the law, especially within United States. But still, he was an independent diplomat, an independent president, and he was kidnapped from Venezuela, probably also with the knowledge of Venezuelan elites, because we don't see many protests about this kidnapping in Venezuela. So he was not liked in Venezuela, that's for sure. Maduro was not liked in Venezuela, but still he was a president of independent country, and the United States as a general democracy and also the country, it was probably one of the first democracies in the contemporary world, and it wants to spread this idea of freedom, of justice, and of democracy to the entire world. So when we see something which completely is reversal to these ideas, to these very high, good, noble ideas, we have doubts and we have also anger about these things. But Maduro is right now is in jail. He will be probably sentenced to some years in jail. But still, the protocol was that he was an independent head of a state, and if I like him, if I don't like him, I cannot just as another, for example, ruler of another state, kidnap some other president because I don't agree with him. Because if we behave like that, the diplomacy will be non-existing and there will be only savage violence. But in case of Iran, I think the situation is different. Though I don't like I don't like generally wars everywhere, but Middle East and Muslim world is in crisis. We see this in aspect of Islamic theology, of Islamic sects, because we have two different strains of Islam, major strains, Sunni Islam and Shia Islam, and these strains are often at war with each other. They don't like each other, but they also commit horrific acts of violence against each other. But we also see that Islam is generally uh, mm, leaning toward being rather a cult or a sect than a serious religion. We saw this, for example, in case of Hamas fighters doing bloodshed of Jews 2 years ago in October in Israel, but we also saw that in murdering Jews in Australia by Pakistani Muslim. So, and also, for example, we see these acts of violence, and these acts of violence are horrific. They are in a sense they are horrific because often Muslims use themselves as bombs, and they go toward mostly civilians. We saw this, for example, in a really vicious attack on churches in Sri Lanka. So Muslims in Sri Lanka checked when the most important holiday of Christianity is, and this is of course Easter, when the Christ was dying on a cross. They wear suicide vests and bombs, and they enter churches in the holiest days of the Catholic and the Christianity in general, and they blow themselves up. They murder like 200 and something people, mostly women and children. So if we and for example, another act of this violence is of course when United States were pulling out of Afghanistan. There was a young Hindu man, Indus. He was an Indian of a Muslim faith, because Islam in general was created in Saudi Arabia, in modern day Saudi Arabia lands, but the most majority of Muslims today are from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And this Indian man blow himself up when Afghan civilians tried to escape to the United States. He murdered like 200 or 300 other Muslims. So we see that these acts of violence are vicious, but they are also lame, because you can commit, for example, vicious acts of violence, horrific acts of violence. We saw this, for example, in Nazi Germany, when they were murdering Jews in gas chambers. We see these acts of violence, for example, when there was a conquista and Indians, or especially Incas, Mayas and Aztecs, were sacrificing people, or even teenagers or children, on the altars. Or they were carving out their hearts from still living victims. But these acts of violence were gruesome, but they were not lame and childish, because Native Americans still were formidable enemies, ruthless, savage, but they were still a toe-to-toe enemy to the Hispanic conquistadors. The same thing is about Germans. They still were the most powerful army in the world. Hitler is still, even though he is in a way a monster, because he was the perpetrator, or the main perpetrator of the Second World War, and this conflict was the greatest conflict on our earth, when 70 million people or something like that died, so many of them murdered in very brutal way. Even though the German army is still respected for conquering almost all Europe, and probably, if they were more lucky, they were even able to conquer whole Russia. So still they are seen as bad guys, but they are respected. They are respected for their bravery, their viciousness, their in a way savagery, but also for their general tough fight with its enemies. So only Allied Russian and American forces were able to defeat them. But in case of Muslims, we see that most of them they commit these acts of violence which are completely lame, they are completely infantile, and they completely degenerate Muslim religion to the core. So, if we are talking, for example, about Iran and war with this country, of course, Iran didn't attack Israel and didn't attack United States of America. America and Israel attacked Iran, so I'm against this war. But nevertheless, I can understand it. I can understand it because Shia Muslims, they Iran is a specific country because it's a rather huge Muslim country, but it is one of the few countries with vast majority of Shia Muslims. And the Shias, they are like 10%, 12% of whole Muslim Ummah, whole Muslim world. But even though they were persecuted, and they are still persecuted by the majority of Sunni Muslims, they, even though they are persecuted, they still think that their religion is a true religion. Their vision of Islam is the true vision of Islam. So they don't commit suicide bombings like Sunnis. They committed some acts of violence like suicide bombings in Lebanon in the 80s, but they didn't do it right now. But they don't do it right now. But nevertheless, they are still Muslims, and they think that Islam should rule the whole world, and that their religion is one and true religion. Besides that, Iran, except Saudi Arabia, has the most death sentences in Muslim countries. So even though Shias are persecuted as Shias by Sunnis, they still operate of death penalty, and in vast way of using it. So, for example, they are killing homosexuals, male homosexuals. We don't know how many, we don't know how, because most of it is hidden, like in China. So we don't know exact statistics, but they do it. So we see that. Right now, Islam is in a great crisis. We see that young Muslims are behaving like savages, and they are not behaving even like Indian savages, because we use this term generally for Native Americans, because Native Americans were defending their lands from the aggressors, from the Spanish conquistadors, Portuguese conquistadors, and also from the British. So even though they were savage, they were ruthless, they were cruel, it was their lands. They lived that for when their ancestors emigrated from today's China territory to Americas. So this is their native land, and they can do what they want to do, because okay, they are cruel, they are vicious, but it's their land, their religion, and so on. And the times were, of course, different than modern day times. But right now we see that that Islam is degenerating itself, because if we see young men, because usually the suicide bombers are like, let's say, 14 to 35 to 40, this tactic is completely useless in a way of spreading Islam by the sword, by violence, because many of the victims, if not most, are other Muslims, and these acts are against mostly civilians. So, for example, we see this in Spain when they blow up the metro trains. These were Muslims from Morocco. We see this when Arab Muslims from France, for example, he used a car and drove through crowds on the beach and killed ran over and killed like 100 people or something like that. We see this when Charlie Hebdo newspaper was attacked, and these French journalists were murdered also. But a Charlie Hebdo attack was a little bit different, because it was a provocation from the newspaper, because they were hating on and they were in a grotesque way presented Prophet Muhammad. So it was a little bit different situation than others, but most of these situations are when the Muslims are the aggressors. And we see that. So, for example, I'm from Poland, and I'm happy that even though my government was mostly right-winged, ruled by Prawo and Sprawiedliwość party, I still am glad that they didn't choose to open our borders to those immigrants, most of them Muslims. And when we see this confirmation, because for example we see these horrific acts of violence in 9/11 of 2001, when the suicide bombers were kidnapped planes with living people, and they just throw themselves into the buildings, into the very famous buildings of World Trade Center. So we see that if 20 years olds are so lame and so degenerated that they can only kidnap a civilian planes and blow themselves up into the building, wanting to murder as many, because they wanted to murder thousands and thousands of Americans, most of them Christians. So we see that such a religion is more of a cult or a sect than a serious religion, and we see that that the majority of clerics in Islam cannot do anything about it. They don't criticize it. They don't even acknowledge it. They know that they are the victims of their own youth, because the Muslim youth is degenerate. I observe, because when I live in Poland, I see some of the Arabs, some of the Hindus, and for example and some Turks, some Bengalis, and I see that they are really retarded people, degenerate, vicious, vile, and retarded, completely retarded. So such of acts of violence are just not acceptable in our modern civilized world. So I hope that this war, and why this war even broke out. So Iran as a Shia country wants to dominate whole Muslim world, but it can't, because Shias are only 10 to 12% of whole Muslim world, and they are hated by a considerable margin of Muslims. They are hated and they are persecuted. So the Iran wanted to build an atom bomb, and building an atom bomb by countries is forbidden by international law. But for example, North Korea was able to build their own atom bombs, but nevertheless, building and spreading atomic bomb is forbidden. So a country cannot just want to build another atom bomb for themselves, because it threats all human race on Earth. And we see how they behave. And for example, the Pakistan is the only Muslim country which has an atom bomb, and we don't know what they will. For example, because Pakistanis, we have many terrorist attacks in Pakistan, many suicide bombers there. So we are not sure if they, for example, not use atom bomb on and for example the main plot holder, except Osama bin Laden, was a Pakistani Muslim in 9/11 attacks. So we are not sure if, for example, some generals in Pakistan don't think that disbelievers should be killed, because Islam in general was created in Saudi Arabia by Prophet Muhammad, but it was spreading by the sword. Muhammad was killing other people to justify and to spread their own monotheistic religion, Islam, and they succeeded. They conquered Mecca, they conquered Medina, they conquered today's Saudi Arabia, then they conquered even Jerusalem, and later even they were able to conquer almost whole, or even whole Spain, or almost whole Spain, and they conquered in the same time in 8th century modern day India with today's Bangladesh and Pakistan. And they were successful. So we, for example, know this event in history books as Great Arab Conquest. But today's Muslims are not able to do that. Yes, they are not able to spread Islam more, and they usually don't even acknowledge that war and violence is destroying the society. We as Europeans know it a little bit better because we had two world wars, and they were mostly in Europe. So we know that war is especially modern day war with modern day weapons is really destroying whole communities, not only physically but mentally, spiritually, psychologically, and so on. But in Muslim world, uh, even before Islam, in Saudi Arabia, there were always some kind of warfare. It was not a war, but it was some kind of warfare. And in Middle East, and we see this almost in all Muslim world, but especially in Arab Muslim world, and in African Muslim world, that war is almost constant there. So for example, for me, how I look at war with Iran is that I don't accept it. I'm against it, but I understand it because maybe if Trump administration will be successful in destroying the Iran regime, maybe a democracy will succeed. Of course, the same idea was implemented in Iraq, and even though Iraq is a democratic country, um, it's on the bottom of, for example, when we have a passport list, a power passport of different countries, Iraq is almost at the bottom of this list. So we see that even though Americans implemented democracy there, and Shias as a majority can rule there because Shias are like 60%, 40% are Sunnis in Iraq, and they were killing each other in Iraq because of this, and there was some kind of a civil war there when Americans attacked it and occupied it. So here we see that there are no ground forces in this war with Iran, but I hope that it will help Iran's elites understand that they need to change their ways. Because Iran is also a theological country, Muslim theological country, ruled by Ayatollahs. So they are some kind of clerics in Muslim world, in Shia Muslim world, and also Arab countries are. They don't trust Iran. They don't trust Iran because they know that Iran wants to spread in Sunni lands. It wants to spread its vision of Islam, the Shia vision of Islam. So, for example, we see right now that they are throwing drones and other aerial vehicles and missiles into Gulf states, or they were even shooting at, for example, Azerbaijan and so on. So we see that they know that Arab countries are not supporting this war actively, but they probably want Iran to be weakened. They want to be weakened because Iran wants to spread its version of Islam to the Sunnis. Because the Shia version of Islam is that Caliph Ali, third great Caliph, was a proper ruler to the Prophet Muhammad, and other three before him were usurpers. And this is a very controversial topic, very aggravated topic. Sunnis are not agreeing with this, and because of that they are killing each other, because they think that those three first caliphs were rightful rulers to the caliphate state, to the Muslim state of first stages. So even though I am aware that like 1,000 people died in this war, and many people see this as a war for Israel, because Israel is not with good relations with, is in very bad relations with Iran regime. But I understand and I see that that Israel is the only civilized country in that region. When I, for example, talk with Israelis or with Jews, and I talk with Arabs, I see that this there are even though they are both Semitic people. One of them, they are Jews and they believe in Judaism. Others are mostly Muslims. They believe in Prophet Muhammad and the Quran. I see that the gap between them, between these two ethnic and religious groups, is enormous. Is enormous, really. When I talk with some Muslims from Arab world and so on, they are completely degenerate people. I had a Turks. Um, I was a landlord to some Turks, and they were really lame, degenerate people. So I can tell as much as I can tell. So I see that. That even though, for example, in Poland, most people don't like Arabs more than Israelis, because gypsies and Arabs are the most not likable ethnic groups in Poland, but Jews are just above them. So they are like third group. Maybe right now they are fourth group because of the Russians and Belarusians because of the war with Ukraine. But apart from that war, most not likable people are gypsies, and gypsies are of course from India. So they are most like Indians, Pakistanis, Bengalis, and Sri Lankans. And then Arabs are also not likable in Poland, but Jews are just above them. So they are also not very likable in Poland. But I have a friend, and this friend was asking me also about because he thinks that we didn't discuss it very thoroughly, but for him it was generally agenda of Israel to use United States and Trump as leverage to attack Iran, and there is true in that American elites, especially Protestant elites, they in a way don't like Jews, but mostly because Jews are liberals. So they don't like Jews because of that, and they don't like Jews because mostly because of their liberal attitude into American society. But they support Israel because in Protestant understanding of Christian ways, they are necessary for the second coming of Jesus. So for Protestants, and especially for Protestants elites, Jews are really important in a theological way. So they support Israel, even though America supports also Egypt and other Arab countries in the region, Saudi Arabia and so on. But Israel is supported in a very special way. So this kind of war is a little bit strange, because Arab countries will be happy that Iran regime will change, because they fear that if Iran will be able to gain an atom bomb, it will be leverage against Pakistan, who has an atom bomb and is a Sunni country, and for example, for Iranians as Shias, it will be a massive asset, because there are many instances, for example, like in Iraq, but also in Syria, when Sunnis and Shias are conducting war with each other. So they especially young Muslims, like 20 to or like 15 to 40 years old, the youngsters don't like each other. They murder each other. They blow themselves up in the mosques. We even saw Sunnis going into Shia mosques and blowing themselves. So many Sunni Muslims, especially young, they think that Shias are heretics. So for Arabs, even though they don't say it openly, this regime change for them is positive. And I think that for our society, like European society, is also positive, because we cannot allow more countries to have atomic bomb. I think it was a really mistake that United States allowed North Korea to gain its own atom bombs. Because it's another country which right now have atom bombs, and we cannot allow this kind of weapon to spread because it's too dangerous. But in a case of war in Iran, even though I think it's not legitimate war, I hope that it will change the regime in Iran, and it will change in a way the behavior of Muslims in general. Because right now Muslims are in this savage shock of modernity or something like that. Because let's say, look about this terrorist attack. Most of them are in contemporary times, from the 80s. But before that, there were no such an attacks. So we see that something very evil is going, especially into young Muslims. Something very vicious and very dangerous. Because if you are a man, young man, and you want to achieve something, especially religiously, and you taking a bomb and you are entering into holy temples of other religions, or even our own religion, or going into crowd of people and want to blow then there yourself and murder as many people as you can, we see that you are infantile and you are a degenerate. So we cannot allow this to happen. And we see that Muslim clerics are aware of this problem, but they are completely omitting it. They don't say nothing about the suicide attacks on 9/11. They don't say anything about October massacre of Jews in Israel. They say nothing about Bondi Beach attack. So they completely ignoring the problem, and the problem is big, and it is destroying Islam from within. It's destroying Islam from within, because right now in our times there is no religion which uses violence so openly. You cannot use violence so openly in modern day times, because earlier, of course, the Christianity were spreading by violence, especially in the times of conquista and conquering the new world. It was spreading into Africa by violence, and some of this violence was religious, but mostly it was rather like racial violence, ethnic violence, and so on, or colonization violence than religious one. But these are the times of the past. Right now in modern day, we don't see Hindu people, or Buddhist people, or let's say Christian people blowing themselves up in their own temples or in the temples of different religions. And we see that Muslims are behaving just like that. And it is even new for Islam, because in Islam, of course, we have this concept of holy war, of jihad, but this concept is a very strict one. So you cannot just be a random Muslim who thinks that he will participate in jihad. You need to have acceptation from your elites, from your elders. And it needs to be a serious decision, because war is war. For you, it's a holy war, but for the side you are attacked, it's a vicious, violent war. So you need to be aware of this situation, and use it in a very careful manner, especially in contemporary world. But when, for example, Muslims in Great Britain, he wants to blow Jews in the synagogue by strapping itself with a bombs, and he's called jihad. We see that something is completely wrong with these people, even because they are almost behaving like a sect or like a cult, very dangerous cult, because maybe Christians in the future will be behaving like that, or maybe Hindus will be behaving like that, because they, for example, say that Muslims conquer India, so we have rights to right now wipe them out because we Hindus rule India right now. So for me, war in Iran is more understandable than other behaviors of Trump. And I always will rather choose Israelis and Israel because they are rational country, they are a civilized country in that region. And it is their own native country. It is their own native land when they created culture far long ago in the ancient times. So if this war will be successful, if this war will bring regime change, many Iranians hope so, because they are mostly against this intervention in general, but they also don't accept its religious, often very degenerate elites. So, for example, the leader of the Iran was killed by Israeli airstrike. Another was chosen, but if it will change the Muslim world, it's very difficult to say. But I hope that it will show Muslims that, because right now they feel probably anger, yes, that the Christians and that the Jews are doing what they want to do, and they just participating in another war. So I understand that from the Muslim perspective, of course, but for me, Iran is too dangerous to be just live alone, just like North Korea, because they would probably be able to create an atomic bomb, and it is too dangerous for our times to another country have an atomic bomb, and it is rather vicious country, probably a third country in the world with most death penalties, one of the few countries, even in Muslim world, who is openly killing male homosexuals. So it's a really dangerous country, and and I hope that this war will bring some kind of understanding from the Muslim side, that they need to change their ways, but they also can say that for them it's not like that, because Muslim Ummah was creating by war, and they right now the Muslims trying to understand that you like war when it is favorable to you, but you of course don't like war when it is not favorable to you. When you are a winner, this war is good and pure and brave and so on. When you lost the war, you say that the war is vicious, degenerative, bad, and so on. So for Muslims, it's a difficult time, because Muslim world was created by conquest, so by war, by violence. And right now they see that this violence, which earlier was a very positive sign for Islam, because it also in a way showed that their religion is true, because if we are winning and other religions are losing, and they conquer Jerusalem and let's say contemporary Israel, so region when Christianity and Judaism were created, and then they conquer whole India. So and India, Buddhism and Hindus were created. So if they and they say about other religions that they are disbelievers. So if they conquer disbeliever lands and with their own holiest places and sites, it means that Muslims are right, that the Muhammad was right, his prophethood was right, and other disbelievers are wrong. But right now it's not that simple, because Muslims are mostly losing its wars and they cannot even understand if they should participate in wars, if they should have wars, and most of these wars in Muslim world is with each other. So most violent wars in Muslim world is with each other. We see this, for example, in a way in Iraq, when most violence was between Iraqi Sunnis and Iraqi Shias. In Syria, it was between Shias and Sunnis. So the elites are aware of this problem. In Yemen, war between Houthis, who are Shias, and Sunnis. So this jihad is generally right now inside the Muslim world between each other, and it is unfortunately for the Muslim world destroying whole culture, whole even Islamic civilization. So I hope, and I don't see it as just Trump being a puppet of Benjamin Netanyahu. I see that Trump has a vision. I don't agree with his vision. He's a very right-winged politician and right-winged president. I don't agree with him. I think he's rather sick, vicious, old person, and he shouldn't be a president for the second time. But he was chosen by American people, so he is a president of the United States. I don't agree with him. I don't agree with his politics, with his immigration politics. He's wanting to acquire Greenland because he wants to acquire Greenland. I want to rule whole Europe also. But we see that he's in a way unstable, because most old people, when they are old, they are very aggressive and rather weird and very and can be very aggressive and not pleasant, and we see this in Trump behavior all of the time. So I hope this war will end, but I hope also that it will bring a change into not only to the whole religion, but to the Islam in general, because Islam needs change in a many ways, in economic way, in sociological way, in psychological way, in theological way, in mentally processed way, in many ways. We will see what will happen. Let me know in the comments what do you think about this war, about the challenges, about this issue of Israel being just a country, of United States being just and Trump being just a puppet of Israelis. I don't believe in it. I just think that Trump is a very conservative Protestant Christian, and Benjamin Netanyahu is a conservative Israeli politician, and that's all. Let me know in the comments what do you think about these issues.